and discuss firstly the things I am and have been involved with because of the cube, and at the moment what I think the meaning of Live Your Dream is. After that, I'll share a little bit more about myself, some of my plans and goals for Rubik's Cubes, and to finish it off, I prepared 10 tips relating to speed cubing. Although I do realise I'm not really in a position to be giving much life advice. Being 20 years old, I don't have too much life experience at the moment. So I understand that the theme of the day is Live Your Dream, and whilst I'd love for everyone in the world to do speed cubing for a living, no one is going to be able to do that at the moment. So some things really are impossible. Even for me, I have no idea where my speed cubing journey will go next. At the moment, I've just turned 20 years old. I live with my parents while also attending university, so I do have the time to practice and travel because I'm only at university for maybe 36 weeks in a year. And sometimes I can even travel during the semester. At the moment, I'm on holidays. However, I think that sometimes people do get the impression that I cube for a living just because of the practice and travel and competing that I am able to do. I'm simply lucky enough to be in a situation where I can do these things, and whilst I have put a lot of hard work and effort into speed cubing, it's not without the support of many people that I would be able to do this, namely my parents, friends, and the speed cubing community. So that, in combination with having the time to devote to speed cubing and related activities, mean I can sort of live my dream, in a sense. So a little bit of background information about myself. I was born in Melbourne, which is the second largest city in Australia. It sits on the southeast border of mainland Australia, as indicated on the map. I have lived there since I was born, and right now I still live at home with my parents and my younger brother. Melbourne prides itself on being the cultural and sporting capital of Australia. It is home to the famous Melbourne Cricket Ground, the Yarra River, Flinders Street Station, and it is situated just west of the Great Ocean Road and the 12 Apostles. I went to primary school and high school in Melbourne, and I'm currently studying at Melbourne University, and I'll speak a little bit about that later. So my first memory of a Rubik's Cube is from when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I remember playing with one whilst on holidays with my family and trying to exercise my patience. I was very determined to solve it, but it seemed the harder I tried, the harder it became. And I probably spent about 30 minutes trying to solve it, but I couldn't even get close to solving one side. It wasn't until April 2008 that I came across Dan Brown's YouTube tutorial. Did anyone learn from Dan Brown? Put your hand up. Yeah, a few, good. It's one of the oldest tutorials. And upon watching this video and seeing speed cubing videos, I became very interested in the idea that the cube was not only solvable, but solvable in under 10 seconds, which I thought was amazing. So I went to a shop, bought a Rubik's Cube, and spent 1 or 2 hours learning how to solve the cube from this tutorial. I don't remember the first time I actually solved it, but all I remember after that point was that I took a cube everywhere that I could. At home, in the car, at school, I couldn't stop cubing. I think it was only after a month that I stopped taking it to school. Still, I was practicing all the time, learning methods, algorithms, and improving. And just of interest, was anyone in this room speed cubing in 2008? In 2008. Nobody? 2009, 2010? Okay, so most of you are sort of newer cubers. So back in 2008, Australia didn't have any Rubik's Cube competitions, so my family travelled to New Zealand for a competition in July 2009, my first ever WCA competition. And at this competition, I was able to get my times officially recognised and recorded an average of 12.56 seconds, which put me approximately 50th in the world at the time. So 54th in the world. And you might recognise a few names there, maybe Anthony Brooks, Lucas Garron, and at that time they were faster than me. Still, 50th was good, but when the 2009 World Championships took place, I started to realise I could match it with some of the best speed cubers in the world. I couldn't go to the 2009 World Championships, but if anyone was around then, you'll remember that the long-haired Brendan Vallance won with an average of 10.70 seconds. And at the time, I was averaging around 11 seconds. So to think that I could have made the finals and been competitive at a world championship was very motivating. So back then, I was motivated by the top cubers of the day, Erik Akkersdijk and Yu Nakajima. I'm sure some of you will have heard of these guys. These guys were ridiculously fast. So Erik, because he seemed very laid back, so Erik is on the left, and Yu Nakajima, because he could become the best in the world at any single event with a few weeks of practice. He was amazing. Particularly those two, but many others as well, inspired me to keep practicing with the hopes of one day matching their cubing speed, let alone their status. So I kept on practicing and practicing until we held the first ever Australian competition in Melbourne. At the competition, I was fortunate enough to be able to solve well and get the average world record at 9.21 seconds, which is probably the record that meant the most to me at the time. So slowly, the speed cubing scene in Australia grew. We held more and more competitions, thanks to the hard work of delegates like Tim McMahon and Dean Beardsley. Tim kickstarted the Rubik's Cube scene in Australia thanks to his involvement with the RMIT Rubik's Cube Club. This was a Rubik's Cube club at a university in central Melbourne, and this club ran all the competitions in Australia from 2010 to 2012. Throughout high school, I was able to attend most competitions in Australia, but from 2011 and to 2013, I only travelled overseas twice to compete, and those two occasions were the two world championships in that period. So in 2011, the world championships were held in Bangkok, Thailand, and many people would thought I had a very good chance of winning. I ended up placing third in 3x3 behind Ro Hessler and the world championship, once again, the long-haired Mikhail Pleskowicz in 2011. And I wouldn't say that losing this competition was painful, but I definitely did take some time off cubing in 2012 because I'd practiced for 3 years, and I knew I'd have to wait another 2 in order to have another shot at the title. I still practiced for competitions, but in 2012 I was only able to attend 3 competitions, and over the next 2 years people gradually caught up to my speed, and in early 2013 Mats Volk broke my 5.66 world record with his famous 5.55 second solve. And as it happened, we ended up head-to-head as the final seeds in the 2013 World Championships, and thanks to a +2 penalty, I managed to win by just a small margin, which was an immense relief. So after the 2013 World Championships, I graduated from high school, and I was finally free to explore more of the possibilities of speed cubing. Throughout high school, whilst my parents were very supportive of my cubing endeavours, and I was invited to go overseas for competitions, it wasn't practical, and my parents certainly weren't willing to let me go alone overseas by myself. So since turning 18, starting university, I've become more independent, and I've been able to travel to places I simply would not have been able to previously, like Mexico. So the last few years have seen huge growth in speed cubing competitions worldwide, and with that becomes more opportunities and possibilities, not only for me, but for many others, as speed cubing becomes truly global. Over the last few years, I've realised that speed cubing times are definitely approaching their limit. People often ask me what I think the limits for speed cubing really are. In my opinion, with the current methods and cubes that are available, which have been developed and improved over the last decade, I think that a 6.00 second global average is about the limit, but I'll be very happy to be proven wrong. That's not to say that someone can't do a 5-second average in competition, but I think consistently solving under 6 seconds is probably impossible. And just from this graph alone, so this is the World Cube Association data, it's very, very clear to see that throughout time it's approaching some sort of limit. In the last 5 years, the Rubik's Cube single world record has dropped only just over half a second in 5 years, from 5.66 to 4.90, which is pretty small. Particularly for scramble-dependent events such as 2x2, Pyraminx and Scube, the world records, even the averages, are impossible to break with a certain set of scrambles. And Lucas Edder's 4.90 record was a huge milestone, and it certainly keeps things interesting. It's enjoyable to see a range of different people from all around the world being so close on the WCA rankings, and they're constantly shifting. So that's a comprehensive outline of my cubing history and a few extra thoughts. And remember, if you have any questions about anything specific, feel free to ask them at the end of the presentation, because I'm happy to answer some questions afterwards. Now, I'm going to talk a bit more about this whole idea of living your dream. And like I mentioned at the start, I by no means make anything close to a living from speed cubing. It's just a casual job. However, I'll go over in detail sort of the things that I do that are speed cubing related, and you'll see that actually I've come to the point where I spend more of my time doing things that is for speed cubing that aren't practice. So we'll start out with sort of a little bit of income streams, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. So this is just sort of how I make a little bit of like money with like a casual job for speed cubing. So basically, it's three things. YouTube AdSense, as I'm sure you're all aware, YouTubers with followings can make a little bit of revenue by placing ads on their videos. And because my videos do manage to get a decent amount of views, that's my sort of first income stream from speed cubing. But I don't really consider myself a YouTuber because I see YouTube as secondary to my main pursuit, which is just speed cubing. Nevertheless, I enjoy posting videos of home and competition solves, and when I get a chance, replying to comments. So besides YouTube, my other main sort of source of income is sponsorship. So up until 2013 or so, sponsored speed cubers were unheard of. But over the last 3 years, there has been significant growth in speed cubing, and a lot of the top speed cubers around the world are sponsored in some capacity. I see this as a great new element in the speed cubing world because most cubers are pretty young and either may have to rely on their parents to travel to competitions or forego traveling because it's very expensive. So sponsorships mean that more cubers can go to more competitions and more of the fast guys can attend the big competitions, which is a win-win situation for everyone involved. So at the end of 2014, I noticed an Australian speed cubing store called speedcube.com.au who had just started up, and they got in contact with me, discussed ways which I would be able to help with their business and act as an ambassador for their brand, and they would act as my sponsor. And I'm sure you're all aware, last year they were my sponsors and will be the case again this year. And also I announced a week or two ago that Gans Puzzle will also be sponsoring me this year. So that's sort of how I make a sort of part-time job out of speed cubing. So beyond that, I get miscellaneous requests to sometimes demonstrate speed cubing at a function or party or something like that, which is always good fun. So that's the income side of things, and really it's nice, and it allows me to fund some of the speed cubing activities and travel that I do, but really it's just a casual job. But I cannot understate how grateful and lucky I am to be able to call speed cubing my job for now. So that's the work side of things, and besides all of that, I do a bunch of other things. For example, Facebook and Twitter, well, I don't post that much. I try to respond as much as I can, and for example, Twitter, I check my notifications like every morning, and any reasonable questions, I'll take the time to answer. Additionally, I do a little bit of work for the RCD Foundation, which is a charity devoted to brain health and awareness. And Connor, whom the foundation is named after, was actually a speed cuber himself. And then beyond that, I get a lot of miscellaneous requests, whether it be a radio interview, podcast, video, that sort of thing. And I think it's happened at least 3 or 4 times that a company has asked if I can record a video of, solving their branded cubes. And amongst all that, I need to somehow find a way to actually practice, which sometimes can be pushed to the side. A very common question that I'm asked is, how much do I actually practice? And it can be hard for me to put a number on it, so I'll try and answer this properly. And that is, it depends. So I see practice in 2 forms. Firstly, there's practice where you're just casually solving a cube, whether that's around the house, doing something, watching TV, cooking, and these solves are not timed. You're not timing these solves, you're just playing with the cube and solving it. And then So that practice, I probably do around 30 or 40 minutes per day if I'm at home, just casually solving. And the second type of practice, sessions where I sit down at the computer with a timer and do sessions and take averages. And I probably do that for anywhere between 1 and 7 hours per week. It really depends. So let's say on average, 3 or 4 hours per week of timed solves. And that's because I do a lot of other things at the moment. Back in 2008, 2009, 2010, when I was starting, I practiced lots more. So yeah, that's how I sort of improved. And the main thing is that I don't really see it as a chore. I only practice when I want to. So before the World Championships last year, I actually took a log of the amount of time that I practiced. And whilst reading through it, it seemed like a lot, but it only added up to 50 hours for the month of timed solves, which is less than 2 hours a day, and that's probably the most intense practice I've done in a long time. So I hope that answers the question of how much I practice. Sponsorship, Lucas Eder, demonstrations. This is at Google, Melbourne. They invited me to their office to just show a bit of speed cubing. And this was the practice log before the World Championships in June 2015. So that's those were my timed sessions on the computer. So that just gives you an idea of the practice I did before the World Championships this year. And I practiced more 6x6 than 3x3, which is a little bit strange. Okay, so I mentioned a little while ago that over the last few years, I've been lucky enough to travel to a few places around the world for speed cubing. And I thought it might be a nice idea to share some photos from those trips. So I'll have photos from 2014, where I went to the US Nationals and to South Africa. And then last year, I visited South America and China. And funnily enough, Mats Valk went on all of these trips. And so this is the first time since 2010 that I've gone overseas without Mats Valk, which is just interesting to think about. So I miss him. So let's start with the 2014 US Nationals, which were held at the Liberty Science Center, New Jersey. And the awesome thing about this competition was it was literally on the other side of New York City. So New York is around 18 hours on a plane from Australia, which is quite a long way. I spent about a week in New York before the competition, before it was time to compete. And US Nationals is always one of the largest, most competitive tournaments, and 2014 was no exception. Colin Burns won that competition with an average of 8.32 seconds, and he would go on to break the single world record within the next year, recording his famous 5.25 second solve. So these are a couple of photos from that trip. So that's Anthony Brooks, Mats, and there's a lot of cubes behind us. This is Times Square, New York. And that's another sort of image of New York City. So that was US Nationals 2014. And if you can, I would strongly recommend trying to go to US Nationals because it's a really, really great experience, if you can. So in November 2014, Mats Valk and I were again invited to South Africa for 2 competitions. And at the time, the South African speed cubing community was just beginning, and they had held 1 competition ever. And so to help launch speed cubing in South Africa, the competition organisers decided to invite us there for 2 competitions. Like I said, they had 1 competition ever in South Africa, and they were looking to build on that and host more and more competitions. And in 2015, South Africa held 9 competitions, which is really, really awesome. And I hope that something similar can happen in Mexico. You guys hold 15, 20 competitions this year, so fingers crossed, because I think it's just a matter of time. And that was at a school in South Africa. And also I was lucky enough to go on a safari, so that's what that one's from. So next up was South America in 2015. The World Championships were being held in Sao Paulo, Brazil. But the amazing Nathan Riggenbach decided it would be fun to show some speed cubers around his home country, Peru. So Nathan, working tirelessly organising competitions and travel plans, he pulled it off in spectacular fashion, hosting competitions in Arequipa and Lima in Peru. So after that, it was time for Worlds in Brazil, followed by visiting Buenos Aires, Argentina. Seeing the speed cubing communities in South America really highlighted to me just how global speed cubing really is. It's a universal thing that has the ability to connect people from entirely different backgrounds from all around the world and foster a great sense of community, like I'm sure you can all see. So that was a bus in Peru. Next to me is Mats Valk, and then in the front and centre is Ron van Bruchem, who was the founder of the WCA, the World Cube Association, from the Netherlands. It's cubing, and that's me and Mats after the final in 2015, just sharing a laugh. And finally, in October last year, Mats, Colin Burns, Antoine Cantine, and myself were invited to go to the Chinese Championships, which was an entirely different experience. It was a huge novelty for the Chinese cubers to have international guests, and combining that with the competition being the first ever Chinese championship meant that it was the second largest speed cubing competition of all time. The Chinese very much enjoy their speed cubing. So here are a couple from China. It's Colin Burns and Mats Valk. And you might have heard of Uwe Meffert's puzzles. That's Uwe Meffert. And now, in 2016, I'm lucky enough to be here in Mexico, and even though I'm only here for 1 week, I'm loving Mexico already, and I'm sure I'll see lots of cool things and visit some cool places, which I'm looking forward to, and I have so far. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about what my plans and goals are for this year. But firstly, let me share what my 2015, so last year, my goals. So my 3 goals last year were to break the world record single, no. To win the world championships, yes. And 3, to turn cubing into a part-time casual job, which I managed to do. So although I didn't achieve the first one, I was pretty pleased with the year. It's good to set tough goals because even if you don't end up achieving them, you'll probably come close. So with that said, my 3 main 2016 goals, which one of them I've already broken, are to get a sub-5 single in competition, no averages over 8 seconds, which unfortunately, sorry, I've already had 2 averages over 8 seconds. And then lastly, to try and explore ways to make a career in speed cubing, and so I'll see. In addition to those, I have plans to visit alongside Mexico, go to the European Championships this year, and I want to finish learning a few ZBLL algorithms, if anyone knows what they are, by the end of February. Regarding events, people sometimes ask if I have any intention of becoming world class at, blindfolded, side events, pyramid, cube, that sort of thing. And I think if I did that, it would probably detract from my progress on main events, which, my main events are 3x3 to 7x7, one-handed, and then sort of 2x2, but not really. I don't really like 2x2, and then mega mix. So as for plans beyond this year, we'll have to wait and see. If I took 2017 to do cubing full-time, it could be a lot of fun, but we'll have to wait and see. So you can see by now that speed cubing is a very big part of my life, but I'm often asked about what exactly I do outside of speed cubing. Some people probably think that I cube 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whilst that would be fun, I think it would get a bit boring and repetitive. So I finished high school at the end of 2013, and in 2014 and 2015, I've been studying at Melbourne University. The degree I'm taking is a Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in economics, combined with studying a side sequence of mechanical engineering subjects, with a view to do that as postgraduate study. I like economics because it's essentially just logic. It tries to make sense of the world whilst recognising that the world sometimes doesn't make sense. My interest in economics isn't so much on the government, public policy side, but more so about the mathematical, behavioural side of economics. And that's what I find interesting. Regarding engineering, I'm sure there's a lot of cubers that are probably studying engineering or want to study engineering because that's the sort of people that speed cubing probably attracts, people who are mathematically minded about like problem solving. And that's part of engineering, maths, problem solving, in addition to, of course, physics, programming, things like that. All that being said, I've only just finished 2 years of study, so there's a lot more to learn. And whilst studying can be fun, I think there are certainly things which are more fun than studying. I don't have too many other hobbies besides speed cubing. I've never been really into video games. I do spend a bit of time on the internet, Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, that sort of thing, but I try to limit that. I enjoy sport, not so much actually playing it, but more so watching sport, which probably sounds a little bit sad. But by far, my favourite sport is Australian rules football. It's essentially the national sport of Australia, and by average attendance is the 4th highest attended competition in the world, behind NFL, EPL and Bundesliga. I also very much enjoy watching golf, but I do know that many people find golf very boring, so I won't go into more detail there. I don't watch too much TV. The only shows that I watch consistently are Game of Thrones and Survivor, which for some reason I really, really enjoy, Survivor. I listen to a little bit of music, all sorts of things, pop, rock, rap, that sort of thing. And in no particular order, these are my 5 favourite albums from last year. Currents, but put your hand up if you recognise any of these. Which ones? Tame Impala, very good, yeah. Old J, yeah, awesome. Cool. And the other ones are Logic. If anyone's heard of Logic, the rapper, he can actually solve a Rubik's Cube. And Imagine Dragons as well. Besides all of that, friends, family, speed cubing, that's me. So, to finish the presentation, what I'm going to do is share 10 general pieces of advice that sort of apply to speed cubing. And I've made these not very technical so that they can apply to people of all speeds. Whether you're 1 minute, you're 10 seconds, hopefully you'll get good advice from all these tips. Let me just take a drink of water and just give me 1 minute. Okay, but before I do the top 10, here are a few others that didn't quite make the top 10. So, number 1, for those of you in school, so make sure you do your homework before you practice cubing. It sounds a lot easier than it is, but trust me, it'll make your parents happy, your practice will be better, and you won't have anything in the back of your mind when you're practicing. And if that means you don't get to cube 1 or 2 nights in a week, then don't worry, there's plenty more time to cube. Casual solving. So I mentioned this before in my discussions about practice, but I really think that casual, untimed solves do play a role in progression. When you're not focused on timing yourself and going as fast as possible, you can experiment and play around with the cube and pick things up yourself. Discovering and learning things yourself, whether it's a new way to insert F2L pairs or a new finger trick, it's all really good. When you think you're ready, definitely try learning blindfolded solving. Taking off a blindfold to a solved Rubik's Cube is a very rewarding feeling, and it's worth the time and effort that it takes to learn. And it's a very cool party trick and very impressive to non-cubers, but that's not why you should learn it. This one, the last one, is only probably the one technical one, which is that during your F2L, it's fine to rotate the cube around. People sometimes say, oh, you shouldn't rotate the cube during your F2L. And whilst it's true that solves without rotations can be very fast, I think that solves with rotations can also be very fast, as long as you don't rotate for no reason. So you have to have a reason to rotate the cube. So rotate because it helps the flow of your solve or sets up an easy F2L. And so that's the only technical thing that I'll be saying, so don't worry if you didn't follow that. So with that out of the way, let's get to the top 10. This is sort of technical. So tip number 1. So F2L is the most important part of any speed solve. Most of you who sort of, beyond the beginner method will realize that you can't really do too much to influence the last layer. You can learn fancy tricks and that sort of thing, but for the most part, your first 2 layers need to be efficient and executed quickly, and it's definitely, F2L is the stage that really makes or breaks your solve. Some general advice I'd probably give is to watch example solve videos from fast speed cubers and essentially try to copy how they solve the cube. So learn from their solves and solutions and try to implement that. One thing I'd probably say is that pretty much most F2L cases can be done in 8 moves or less. Number 2, only practice when you want to. This is something I've said a little bit over the last few years, and I think it's fairly important. If you don't want to cube, then don't cube. You shouldn't force yourself to practice. That may even be counterproductive. Number 3, leading on from that, you might not like this one, but have fun. Have fun. So speed cubing is meant to be a challenge, yes, and part of the fun is the challenge. But if you're not enjoying speed cubing one day, then just take a break. Breaks can definitely make you better. I often hear people, they take a week off speed cubing and practice, and they come back and get a PB average and PB single. And I don't know why that is, but I hear that a little bit. Number 4, be involved with the community. So engage with the speed cubing community. Go to a competition. Speed cubing, for the most part, is a solitary hobby, something you do by yourself. And speed cubing by yourself can sometimes be a bit boring. And I suppose that's what all of you guys are here doing today, which is really great. And hopefully you've learnt a few things, talked to some people, made some new friends, which is what it's really all about. It's very motivating to share your cubing experience with other people, even if that is just online. You'll find that online and in person, everyone is willing to help out with advice and tips and encourage you on your journey. Speaking of online, use online resources. So Google, YouTube, Speedcubing Wikipedia page, badmephisto.com. There's so many really, really good resources for learning speedcubing techniques. Searching for information is a good general skill to develop as well. And hopefully you'll be able to tell the difference between, a good tutorial and a bad tutorial. And that can be hard to do initially. One of my longer term goals is to develop the ultimate set of Rubik's Cube tutorials, but that would be a very big project and maybe not this year. Number 6, try to be color neutral. So if you don't know what color neutral is, it's where you start your solve on any color. So most people would probably start their solves on the white cross, but if you can start your solve on any color cross, it would give you a little bit of an advantage. Obviously, switching to color neutral from one color is very, very difficult, and for some people, the cost of the time spent doing that is probably better spent practicing. And you could make the argument that even the top speed cubers in the world, Lucas Eder, Mats Volk, all the other guys, Alexander Lau, the Weyer twins, all them, they all use 1 or 2 colors, and once again, it's a fair point. And you can easily become world-class or world record holder with just white cross, but I do like color neutral because it really helps out with the start of your solve. And so my advice is this: for anyone who averages over 20 seconds, and even if you do average under 20 seconds, you can still try. But if you average over 20 seconds, just try practice being color neutral just for a little bit. And if it works, that's good. If it doesn't work, then just go back to one cross. But just give it a try. So, number 7, is the more algorithms that you learn, the easier it becomes to learn new ones. I remember, and I'm sure a lot of you are, I remember being very scared to learn the PLL algorithms when I started. They were really long, really difficult, and it would take me, 1 hour to learn one PLL algorithm. And now, if I wanted to, I could learn 10 or 15 or 20 algorithms in one day. And eventually you'll learn that most algorithms are just moving different pieces around. So yes, learning algorithms is probably the hardest part in speed cubing, but you just need a bit of patience, and it's a skill that you will improve with time. Number 8, try different puzzles and events. So there are 18 different events in the WCA, and all of them are really fun, except for feet solving. Don't do Rubik's Cube with feet. But I still find fast feet cubing is impressive. So if you're doing 3x3 all day long, it might get a little bit repetitive, and some of the techniques that you'll pick up from other puzzles, such as 4x4, 5x5, Pyraminx, Megaminx, Cube, will be transferable back to the 3x3. For example, on the 6x6 and 7x7, you can't turn that fast just because the cubes don't let you turn as fast as you want to. So it means you need to take less moves and be more efficient, which is a good general principle for speed cubing. Number 9. So you don't have to learn new things all the time. So I see speed cubing as a 2-step process. So you learn something and then you practice it, which is probably very similar for a lot of things. You learn something and then you practice it. So when you learn something in speed cubing, you really have to think about it. For example, if you learn a new algorithm and you see it, if you learn a new PLL algorithm and you see it, it might take you, 2 seconds and you won't execute it very fast, but over time you'll get used to it. And once you practice it enough, it'll be automatic. So the end goal is to not think at all during your solves. And it all happens subconsciously. So don't feel like you need to be always learning new things. For me, I haven't learned many new algorithms for 5 years, so that's just me. And finally, if anyone has ever asked me for advice, I usually give them one word, which is practice. So to just say practice might be a little bit misguiding and dangerous, so let me clarify. So practice the right things. Practice good habits. For example, if you want to be faster, don't practice solving the cross on the top. Don't practice solving the cross on the top. Practice solving the cross on the bottom, because that's a faster technique. And that's what I mean by practicing good habits. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you all for listening and coming. I'm now happy to take questions for as long as we have the time. So thank you. Gracias.